So now in terms of psychedelics, and I would say the thing that you're saying that I totally agree with and find is true is that people's ability to increase their sense making adequately, that open societies can coordinate to solve the problems of the world, doesn't start with sense making. It actually starts with something like virtue, right? It starts with, because it's so common that I forgot this train earlier. People have epistemic certainty, and then they realize that there's other stuff and they're wrong, and they flip in one step to nihilism. It's too much. I can't make sense of anything. Mm-hmm. And there's almost no fortitude to be like, I'm going to try to understand progressively better while acknowledging that I don't, and do hard work and not just cognitively offload. So there's something like epistemic humility and commitment at the same time. Mm-hmm. But there's a virtue that is required to invest in that. There's a virtue that's required to want to hear what you have to say and not just feel some fake connectivity with someone else by outgrouping the same person. So we're on the in-group together, which is it's a bullshit connectivity, right? Or a bullshit hit or whatever it is. So the work that it takes to sense make reality well and to coordinate with each other well, why would people invest in it? There is something that they have to actually value. There's a number of things they have to value deep enough to summon that investment. So do I think that the health of our systems and our global society is connected to the health of individual psychologies and relational health? Absolutely. So the idea, are there emerging technologies and possibilities and awareness about mental health that could be part of the breakthrough, where we actually, in the same way we will say better living through chemistry, DDT, whatever, super helpful for agriculture, and then realize all the harm that it externalized and there's no pollinators left, whatever, we externalize harm to people's mental health, right? So radically increased addiction, depression, complex PTSD for almost everybody, low-grade existential angst for almost everybody. That is not actually the native human condition. That is the result of a society that is optimized for GDP and GDP per capita through optimizing addiction and distraction and competition and shit like that, right? And broken the healthy kind of tribal relationships where there is a basis of real trust with people. And so we need to recognize that externality and say, no, fuck, we actually, the civilization shouldn't be optimizing for GDP. The civilization should be optimizing for the psychological health of the people and their ability, and the social health of the people, their ability to coordinate together, because that's what's going to determine the health of the commons, national security, and everything else, because all the things are fucking done by people. So what is the basis by which humans are making choices and then making choices with each other? What is their own sense making and meaning making and forming their choice making? And what is their ability to coordinate with the sense making and meaning making of other people towards coordinated choice making? That has to become the basis of what civilization is trying to help, right? Trying to serve. Now, I do think that awareness of this, and not just psychedelics, but there's been a huge proliferation in mindfulness and CBT and various different methods. Sure. I think psychedelics have the ability to do state induction easier than lots of other processes, because a Sundance is hard. Not that many people are going to do a Sundance. And even a vision quest and, 4 days of water fasting is hard. And the amount of meditation it takes to start to have an experience of the numinous is hard. So in a culture where people don't mostly do hard stuff yet, can we help them have a numinous experience that puts them in the right direction? You and I have both seen a lot of people be helped by this.
Sure.
But there's a lot of the best people that have ever lived have never done psychedelics. And there's a lot of people who do lots of psychedelics that are just shits. And
true.
If I look at a Jimmy Carter type person who post-cancer, after all the service he did for the world, is something like 98, and he's still swinging hammers, literally building homes for poor people around the world. I'm like, I will take more people like that, even if he's never had a numinous experience. Like whatever condition, that kind of ethical commitment, like I'll take that over people who, because they have a transcendent experience, will do that Facebook kind of weaponized uncertainty. and be very good entrepreneurs who are moving forward something that is a very partial vision that's externalizing harm other places, not paying attention to it. I've seen people do psychedelics and actually say, now I know for real this is a simulation, because I could see into the code of the matrix on an NDMT or whatever. And I know that it's really just a game. And I actually know that my consciousness is the only thing there is. And so I'm just going to fucking win the game.
Yeah, no, it can lead to mania. It can lead to all. It's not a panacea by any means, And I think it's a very important point that this is not there. However, I would dare say let's talk about one of these cheap manipulative tools that we talked about, like where people are arguing about gay marriage, right? Which is patently obvious that, of course, a human being, if you want to get married, it doesn't matter your sexual orientation. I would dare say that someone who is against that in the peak of a guided MDMA assisted journey, as they were completely open, their serotonin system was flooded, and they had that sense of deep belonging and security and connection, that the facilitator could ask them, what do you think about people with a homosexual orientation getting married? I would venture to say that at that point, they'd be like, yeah, for sure. Like if they love, like let them love and like let them be. I do have a fundamental belief that in the right context, to course correct from kind of stubborn, stuck patterns of thinking, the kind of brittle and unplastic, unmalleable belief systems, it has a way of potentially melting those enough and getting to a point where it's like, yeah, we can't do that. Yeah, we can't fuck the oceans. Yeah, we can't fuck over each other. Yeah. Like, I just feel like from my own experience and watching people go through it, there's hope there. There's hope there that it will, even though it's going to create some outliers, and even though, as Moctezuma had his priests all taking, Teotihuacan, which is psilocybin, and cutting the hearts out of people and shoving those hearts in the mouth of, Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird god. And while, certain gang members will take MDMA when they go on a shooting because it'll prevent them from feeling the kind of the impact that they're doing. And certainly it can be used in bad ways. Certainly I've seen people go, completely manic and think that they are the actual linchpin for the world and all of these other things. We're looking at situations that need to make a gross positive impact. And I think the net gross positive impact is going to be overwhelmingly positive, but there will be, certainly casualties to this, and also opportunities for this to be misused. Different cult leaders that could rise using entheogens and different things that are driving people into weird psychologically manipulative states. There's risks. There's no panacea and there's no risk-free solution. It just seems that what we really need is, most people aren't Jimmy Carters. It's a kind of a rare breed. We need something that turns the tide a little faster, because it feels like time is bearing down on us and something needs to happen quicker. And to me, this is the thing that, in my assessment, again, which I need to have humility and saying I don't know the assessment of how much time we have and what is actually going on. But in my assessment, it feels like there's a sense of urgency, and that urgency is there's something that needs to move masses more quickly. And to me, this is the thing that can move the masses more quickly. And there's many, many different ways. I love breath work. I love ecstatic dance. I love sensory deprivation tanks. I love vision quests. I love all of these things. And these methods, I think, are also incredibly important. It just feels like the thing that's going to actually move the masses to the greatest degree is going to be that MDMA-assisted psychotherapy in particular.
I agree that it has really significant, meaningful potential. Mm-hmm. And, we come back to with great power comes great responsibility, or we go off the rails with it. And that's kind of the whole story of our time, is the power of exponential tech not being guided with the right wisdom and the right virtue towards what. So I would consider psychedelics a very powerful psychotechnology.
Yep.
And because of that, I want it stewarded really well.
Amen.
I want to see that the people who are likely to have psychic breaks, there's assessment and they don't go into that first, that the meaning that people make afterwards is facilitated, that they integrate it in a way that actually leads them to more psychological health rather than the various other ways that it can go. So I like the work that Stan Groff did early on with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy was using existing psychotherapeutic techniques and just recognizing that the increased visualization capacity and the increased plasticity, you could get the effects of 50 sessions in 2 sessions. But it was still in the context of people who had deep study and understanding of the nature of psychological health and how to facilitate that. So I think groups like MAPS are doing really important work currently, advancing that kind of early work. And it's always tricky, like with psychedelics or natural medicine or various things that are unregulated. By being unregulated, they can be totally fucked up. But as soon as we understand the issues that you and I understood earlier of how hard it is to have a regulator actually be good,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, I don't really actually want it regulated by the types of regulators we currently have. I also don't really like it unregulated. Fuck, what's the answer? Well, I want it regulated by a collective intelligence that actually understands the issues better. This is why a cultural enlightenment as the basis of new institutions and stewarding new capacities is the only way that I really see. And so, of course, there's this bootloading thing of like, a certain level of cultural enlightenment is needed to even hold psychedelics well. And then, of course, can psychedelics in turn facilitate that? Now, when you start to think about how do you move the masses quickly with regard to psychological health, first, I would just want to retract. I hate the term the masses. How do we have lots of people start to have meaningful shifts in their experience of reality that affects the nature of the choices they're making to be both healthier for them, their close relationships, and the larger world insofar as they affect it? Let's take Facebook, and let's take the fact that my feed is going to be curated to stickiness for me. Stickiness is usually limbic. So during George Floyd protests, the people who would be sensitive to it were just getting image after image of Black guys being killed by cops. And so much so that as I kept scrolling and seeing all of this, it seems like it's the whole world because it's my whole Facebook feed. And so I'm getting vicariously traumatized by somebody that I identify with being traumatized. That is network dynamic, satellite mediated, AI mediated micro trauma at scale that is custom targeted to traumatize each group in their own unique susceptibilities. Like, fuck that. I don't need psychedelics for that. I mean, it might help. I need to actually change that machine. Because could it be sharing with people things that were actually helping to heal and uplift them if it had a different optimization basis? And again, if even the broadcast media, if people are going to click on the thing with the salacious headline, I'm going to have a system of like exponential warfare that is traumatizing to everybody at scale and polarizing them against each other. Those things have to be addressed because people in new environments can heal quickly, and people in the same environments mostly can't. This is actually a really important thing is if you or I got moved to a war-torn region of Darfur, we would change. If we went to a maximum security prison, we would change or we would die. And so am I my own psychology or am I the result of the context I'm a part of? Both, right? And anyone who thinks you're not affected by the context doesn't get it. So there are contexts that everyone is in that are conditioning the things that they condition, and changing those can start to change. So like, for instance, if the moment someone decides that they're going to go do a month-long camping trip with their friends, their generalized anxiety and trust issues and paranoia, as well as addictions, might just start dissolving without psychotherapy because they're having present human interaction. So they're not seeking artificial human stimulus through the dating app and Facebook and porn, whatever it is. They are having interactions where they know they can trust things because they're getting to watch those people. And the trust that is increasing starts to heal them psychologically, whereas they're currently in an environment where they don't know if the people at work are friends or foes. They don't know if the politicians are lying to them to fuck them, saying they're friends or not. That drives people kind of crazy, right? Because now people are running the simulation of, do I trust her or not? Is Q real and they're really blood drinking vampires, or is that totally gibberish and I'm being misled as a psyop? Or Like that drives people crazy. And so when we think about healing, we have to not just think about it as healing the individual, but healing the context that us as tribal people, because individual Homo sapiens never survived. Evolution didn't select for sapiens, it selected for tribes of sapiens. That's another really key part to think about.
Is there any way that we can change the context, change these institutions, change these things without changing the people to demand a different context, right? Like, is there any way that we can rise up against these incredibly effective structures that are creating this chaos, other than knowing that we ourselves, as participatory in them or not, have to reach that state of healing? I mean, it seems to me that ultimately we're saying the same thing. I'm just saying that a priori, the first thing that needs to happen is the individual needs to demand that, needs to want to go on that camping trip, or needs to want to do this other thing in the first place, which is then going to cause them to share different ideas. And then that will actually change the structure. As more people want healthier food, Walmart has become the number one supplier of organic produce, right? And as people move against, different processed food, I'm sure that we'll look back and McDonald's is going to be, crushing it, providing people with the nutrients that are actually helpful for the most part, right? Because they have the system in place, and as demand warrants it, the people will receive it. So to me, it always seems to always go back to, can we get more and more individuals desiring the change, and then allowing these corporate structures, which are going to maximize profit when the profit is in a different area, the area is actually in alignment with what healed people actually want, then the structures themselves will change. But it seems like anything else is, I don't know, I just don't see how it works, but I'm certainly open to it.
You're coming back to the question of, does demand drive supply, or does supply drive demand?
Yeah, I suppose
and
so.
It does both, and we have to work with both of the sides, and we have to work with the virtuous relationship between them. This is a key thing. And this, again, demand relates to the individualist orientation, supply relates to the more collectivist orientation. And to think of them not in a dialectic and what's the relationship between them just won't work, right? It's just silly. It's not understanding the mechanisms yet well enough. So let me give you an interesting example.
Mm-hmm.
There's other ways to interpret this. This is not a comprehensively accurate interpretation, but it's worthwhile as it's illustrative for this. What Elon did with Tesla was, there was not a market demand for electric cars. The oil prices were cheap enough. There wasn't a belief that electric cars could be that good, that the market demand was actually very low. So supply wasn't rising to do it. People were buying SUVs, whatever. And he's like, no, I think we need electric cars because of climate change and stuff that he believed in. I got enough money coming out of PayPal that I can make a source of supply and then manufacture demand where people will want something they don't want right now because they don't even know it exists. And so because of the asymmetry of supply side, he's like, let me make something that is fast as a Ferrari and greener than a Prius and safe as a Volvo and as luxurious as a BMW altogether, and everybody will fucking want it, through ground up kind of innovation, because I can do that. I got enough money to do that. So that was a supply side innovation independent of demand. It was somebody, like one guy's demand, a few people's demand, a belief in what we should demand. They create a source of supply that manufactured demand, where then all the other car companies now are in a race to do that thing. So the other sources of supply had to follow demand, but demand wasn't triggering itself. The market was not self-correcting in an appropriate way without somebody coming in and kind of helping to do that. So in a way, you could say he was playing the invisible hand of the market there, because the invisible hand wasn't doing the thing that it needed to do, because the market wasn't coupled to thinking about long-term environment. And it wasn't coupled to thinking about long-term innovation. So the short-term money-on-money dynamics of the market didn't give it the intelligence it needed to orient. So that's an example of how does a small number of people understanding something, you still have some people that have to come to it, right? He came to that, sure. The other people who are doing it, create something that makes it easier for other people to come to it. This is now individualism driving a collectivism that drives more individualism, that drives more collectivism in the right direction. Right. And so if I grow up in Darfur, or I grow up in Finland, I'm not going to get the same education. I'm not going to get the same psychological conditioning. It's just really, really different. And that has nothing to do with me as an individual. Same genetic, put me in one place or the other place, right? Yep. So how individualist, fucking put me in Finland, right? Like nobody would have a question about which of those educational systems or trauma systems or like access to healthcare, early nutrition. So the libertarian, like, we need to start with the individuals wanting it thing. Okay, well, how does that work for the person born in utter fucking poverty? It doesn't. How does it, where they're born in a poverty where their brain will not develop because of the lack of nutrients or with AIDS or with the kind of trauma that they can't escape? And this is where we get that, like, we affect the whole and we're affected by the whole. We can't think of ourselves just as hive members of a collective because we're much more individual than termites are or bees are. But we also can't think of ourselves just as individuals who are not affected by the whole. So how do we hold ourselves as unique and interconnected at the same time? And agentic, and that can, where all of our agency will affect the environment, which will affect others, but we're also affected by the environment. How do we hold that synthesis together? So some people are going to have a sense of something that is worth doing that the market doesn't currently incentivize, that there isn't adequate demand for. Figure out how to make that thing. This is why it has to start with culture, not start with the market. Because the market is going to incentivize the thing it incentivizes. That's just flowing on the topology of market incentives, and it will continue to incentivize the war with a for-profit military industrial complex is profitable and extraction and blah, blah, blah. So if we want to do something that is different than the power structure currently incents, why? What is the why? Some people have an awakening to a why that is not winning at the current system. Yeah. But they then have to make a system that makes more people able to on-ramp onto it, not just do their own thing. And then that's where you get autopoiesis. That's where you get something that can actually become a strange attractor